Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andrew Stewart and I have various roles within and across Jisc. But today I'm representing Jisc Emerging Practices, which is an initiative set up by my colleague Will Allen and I. And its broad aims are to highlight emerging practices relevant to UK further and higher education, provide support and professional development opportunities, and offer opportunities for like-minded people to share experiences and learn by doing together. Enterprise architecture is a topic that's been of particular interest to Jisc's community, and so we ran a number of events last year to help people get to grips with what it is and how they might get started. Today's presenters are from Staffordshire University and the University of Bolton, both of which have explored EA in a lot more detail, and so it's great to have them both here today sharing their experiences. I'm assuming everyone present today has a basic understanding of what enterprise architecture is. Don't worry if it's still very new to you, but perhaps it is worth doing a quick poll. If you have a basic understanding of what enterprise architecture is, can you give me a green tick? If not, can you select the red cross? And I'll give everybody a moment to select which one they find appropriate, and I'll publish the results on the screen. You can see most people have done that now, just waiting on a couple of people. If you're struggling to see where the green tick or red cross is, it should be within the participants window just below your name. Give people a couple of more seconds and then publish the results. Okay, so we've got a couple of red crosses. Don't worry if it is new to you, but just to give you an indication of our sort of definition of what enterprise architecture is. In a nutshell, we tend to describe enterprise architecture as a high-level strategic technique designed to help senior managers achieve business and organizational change. In his book, Everyday Enterprise Architecture, Tom Graves talks quite elegantly about the topic coming down to one single simple idea. Things work better when they work together, with clarity, with elegance, on purpose. And I think that's a really key point to bear in mind when we're talking about enterprise architecture. If you aren't that familiar with enterprise architecture and would like to find out more, then I'd highly recommend taking a look at some of the resources mentioned in the slide on your screen. Our free online guidance provides an overview of enterprise architecture from a UK higher education, further education and skills perspective. We've also been capturing learning from the events that we organise, all of which are available through the Emerging Practices blog. As we heard earlier, this session is being recorded and it will be available via the blog for future reference too. There are also a number of really useful blogs around. Nikki Rogers became Bristol University's first enterprise architect in 2011 and has been keeping an account of her journey to date, which will be of interest no matter how experienced you are. Similarly, Nick Malik has a very similar blog, which is both informative and inspiring, but he's more from a professional background rather than an education background. One final point before I hand over to the first of our presenters is that there is a fantastic online community called ITANA. You can take part in that in a number of ways. I tend to use the Google Plus community, but there's also a mailing list, conference calls, a wiki working group, and so on. It's very active and provides a fantastic insight into enterprise architecture. I am hoping to push forward a working group looking at some harder evidence around the benefits of enterprise architecture soon. So I'll be posting something to their mailing list very soon. So if anybody's interested in taking part in that, then please join the group. We have two presenters today, Ray Reid, Senior Learning Development Specialist at Staffordshire University, whose talk focuses on transforming the management of external examiners, and Stephen Powell, Reader in Inquiry-Based Learning at University of Bolton, whose talk focuses on improving faculty business processes. Each talk will last approximately 15 minutes. We'll allow 10 minutes for questions at the end of each talk, and we should have a little bit of slack towards the end for any wider discussions. If you do have a question, please ask it within the chat window and prefix it with a capital Q so that we can easily identify it from any background conversations. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Ray.
Great, cheers, Andy. Right, hi all, I'm Ray Reid. I work in Learning Development and Innovation Department at Staffordshire University. Now, I was going to give you a little bit of background about enterprise architecture, but Andrew has already done so, and also by the ticks in the side panel, I don't think I need to actually cover what EA is. Essentially, the way I see EA is, and the way it's helped me with this project is, it's how something looks now, and then how it's going to look in the future once the project comes to completion. Okay, so why did we, Staffordshire University, use EA within our external examiners project? Our quality improvement department, they came to us with an idea which could use our skills. So we sat down with them and other stakeholders. In our case, our stakeholders were staff from faculties within the university. So we took in all the information that they had to offer, and quickly realized early on that we needed a way of taking down the information in a useful format that everybody would understand. We'd heard of external enterprise architecture as a business process, so we decided to give that a go with a real-world scenario to see how that would work out for us. So if I take you on to the next slide, our external examiner process, if we were going to show a process in an old method, as an as-is, how the system looks at the moment, it would have looked essentially just like this. We've got it down here as basically you'd identify the candidate for the external who is going to be the external examiner. That information would be entered within the database. Now, our university has a database which our QIS department, our quality department use, and then the faculties use spreadsheets to basically contain all of their own information. Now, these are two separate silos. The quality department have a database which only they use, and the spreadsheets, the faculties, they only use themselves. You'd then go on to approve the actual external examiner, and if they were right for the job, the quality team would then appoint the candidate. Information is then updated within the database on the quality side, and the faculty would then update the information in their spreadsheets. An examiner would then be given an award to look after, and documentation about the examiner and about the award would then be both stored in the database as well as in the network drives of the faculty and the quality teams. So there'd be a lot of duplication going on. So if I now show you what our as-is diagram looks like when we used enterprise architecture to display it, I fully understand that this is the first time you've seen it and it looks very complicated, but I'll try and take you through it. Now we've got here, if I draw a ring around identify candidate was the first step of the last slide. So you identify the actual external examiner, and that's a job by somebody in the central quality administrator would actually do that. You've also got the award leader who would be watching this process, and the external examiner themselves who would actually apply for the post here. Now, the top bar is the process. So the external examiner applies for the post, and then it's reviewed by the approval panel up here. The approval panel basically has the quality committee on board, and they decide whether the examiner is right for that post. If they're right for the post, then they get appointed. The faculty administrator finds out who's been appointed for that actual job, and the quality administrator, they obviously did the appointing, so they know who's on board. That information then was stored within a faculty spreadsheet. Now that's a separate silo to the Access database over the far side, which also gets that information, and the quality team were updating that database. The contact details then were entered for the actual examiner, and that information was then kept in the database. The same information was kept in the spreadsheet, and also what award the examiner would be looking after, the tenure information about the award, and also that, and all of that then basically makes up the examiner record. Now in the meantime, you've also got the application of the external examiner goes onto an appointment form, and all of that information then gets stored within network drives on the faculty end of things, and also on the network drives within the quality side of things. So again, multiple things being done and being in two different places, and lots of duplication. So if I then take you from a quite messy as is to the completion of the project, which is the 2B, hopefully will make some better sense of what you've just seen.
Ray, can I
just here's the
come in there? We've just had a little message within the chat window. If you use the highlighter pen again, would you be able to use a different colour, please?
Oh yeah,
just
sure.
to try and make it stand out a little bit more. But
okay.
Other than that, it's coming through loud and clear, and everything's really good.
Okay, cheers. I'll just change it to a red colour. So actually, if I can just go back to the as is and clear everything that I actually drew around, just so I can show you the as is over to the 2B, and hopefully you should be able to see what's disappeared and what stayed the same, and then I can show you that basically we've got rid of the database here. We've got rid of all the spreadsheets for all the faculties. I'll just switch back and show you that. And so all of that information is then held within an external examiner service here. We've then also got rid of all of the separate network drives down the bottom here, and all of that information is then actually held within a document management system here. So you've got the external examiner service, which goes into the new application, which we've actually designed, and within this external examiner application, you've got our new database. Our database is running on MySQL. It's using Glassfish to do the front web end of things, and we're using Alfresco as the document management side of things there. So so once we'd used the EA structure to do the as is and 2B, we realized that it was very useful, and we then decided to use enterprise architecture further to build a diagram showing how our new system would work. So I'm going to tunnel down into the actual application that we've got on pilot at the moment. First of all, I just want to show you a quick screenshot of what our new database looks like. It's in pilot stage at the moment. but I'll just quickly run through some things that are on screen. Hopefully you can still see everything that's actually detailed. You've got the examiner information, and in this case I've got myself down as an examiner, just so I don't show you any information that you shouldn't be seeing. You've also got when the tenure starts and when the tenure ends here, and when the faculty actually asked for the examiner to be approved as an examiner. Then you've got this EEAP section, which is the External Examiner Approvement Panel. They then approve the examiner and say he's been approved. You've then got a facility within the application to upload the documents to the document management system, and when somebody uploads a document, that then emails the quality team, so everybody's kept in the loop. There's no longer need for the spreadsheets, and there's no longer need for the database which nobody else had access to apart from the quality team. So everybody can keep everybody informed using the one system. I'll just quickly go on now. I just wanted to show a breakdown of the actual application using Archimate, and that's just done using the 3 different layers of the Archimate language. So the business layer of things, I just wanted to show you that basically you've got actors, and the actors are people that are actually using the system. So in this case, we've got me as a member of LDI, you've got somebody who actually uses the system, and then you've got roles. Now roles are, so the person using the system would be a customer. Me, I'm a software developer, and you can basically see what parts of the system different people are going to be using. You've then got processes, so you've got processes down here right the way from features to tests on the system, to committing the code, to testing the system again, to deploying the artifacts, to deploying the application to a staging server, right the way over to deploying the actual application to the production. So that's the business side of things. You've then got the application side of things. So you've got the IDE, which the actual system's written in. You've got, I'll just pinpoint some of these things out. You've got Subversion, which is the code repository side of things. You've got Glassfish, which is the web application, to actually present the product on screen when you type the web address in. You've then got data objects, which are here. You've got basically our data objects in this case is the actual source code. You've got the unit tests, you've got the build scripts, and you've got the acceptance tests further on down there. And then you've got the components themselves, which are the individual applications which make up the structure. Just jumping forwards, just to make this diagram even more complicated and confusing, you've got the technology layer. Now within the technology layer, which is the green section that's just appeared, you've got the artifacts. So you've got our new database here, and you've also got WAR files, which basically are like zip files. Now, I don't know whether to go into so much detail about the actual artifacts of things. Artifacts within enterprise architecture are generally documentation products, such as text documents, diagrams, and spreadsheets, or even video clips. Now, in our diagram, they're packages of code, so presented by my little drawing around them there. You've also got system software. So on the actual system, itself, you've got MySQL and you've got Glassfish, and you've got Subversion, which is our code repository. And then further on that, you've got the devices of the actual system itself. So you've got the code server, the build server, and the staging server. So once we had that all mapped out, the new application, the useful side of things, the useful side of actually having all these diagrams mapped out like that, you can then quickly build gap analysis. Now, gap analysis without an EA diagram would be next to impossible to show to other people, to show what's going to actually happen in a certain situation. So in our case, we wanted to show what would happen if we had a server failure. So by having the diagram, you can quickly and quite easily find out what's actually going to go wrong if one of your servers goes down. And now this is useful to show to your IT department, which then details how important backups are, obviously how important working servers are. So the build server falls over, which then basically takes with it all of the artifacts. So all the artifacts are unavailable. Now, once the artifacts are unavailable, that then means the applications which are realized by the artifacts, they're also unavailable, which then causes an issue for the applications then stop, and they then stop the delivery feature, basically processing everything from the test stage, which is here, onwards right the way to the deployment of the application on the server. So this type of diagram could be useful to show the impact of failures within changes to the IT infrastructure. That essentially brings me to the end of my section. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing, and it might get you to give enterprise architecture a try within your organization. And that's the end of my little section. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Ray. We've got a couple of questions, if you are willing to answer those. I'll just find the first one a little higher up. The first one was from Claire Foyle at University of Derby. She was asking, was the main benefit of EA for staffs being able to see mapped out just how complicated the process was? And I think this was asked during the slides where you had the as-is and to-be.
Yes, yeah. Basically, we came away from the first meeting with our faculty and quality department, and we had so much information written down on pieces of paper. We needed to show it within a diagram, and yeah, definitely the best way of doing things. Once we realized how good enterprise architecture was at sort of detailing everything, then we definitely knew we were on the right track by detailing it in diagrams like the as-is and to-be.
Great stuff, thank you. Claire, hopefully, I think that answers the question. If you had anything else, please add it to the chat window. We had another question from Dave Burry. Did you use a particular tools or methodologies to write the process breakdown? Yeah,
the tool that we actually used to do the as-is and to-be was Archie, which is a very handy open source application which uses the Archimate language to represent it as a diagram.
Good, so I thought you used that, but I wasn't 100% sure. For anybody that wanted to download Archie, I've added a link into the chat window. If you scroll up a little bit, it was a message that I posted at 12:19, but that was developed by Jisc. It's a really good tool, more powerful than Visio, but maybe it's not quite to the level of some of the very expensive tools that have been used traditionally by major organizations. Another question, Ray, was how did you actually get started learning enterprise architecture?
We kind of did it from a hit and miss kind of basis, because we actually had a scenario where it was going to be useful to have something to detail the process from start to finish within a diagram-based, process. It was very easy to sort of take what the quality department within the university had said, as well as what the faculty department had said, and then we designed the as-is, and then we met up with them again, and we actually had a session where we could correct any mistakes that we or foresights that we actually hadn't put into the diagram. So keeping everyone involved was really useful.
Good stuff. But was that quite embryonic and sort of coming out of your department itself rather than anything at a strategic level?
Yeah, it was completely off our own back that we decided to use EA. Just from the side that we knew it was going to be a very complex process to understand, because the process of having external examiners within the university was something new to us. So we wanted something that we could understand, as well as know that the faculty were on the same wavelength as us with the process.
Great stuff. Sorry, I know I'm firing these questions at you. We've got a couple more. Santos Pardos has asked, he's mentioned a couple of different frameworks, so TOGAF, DODA, PEEF. There's a lot out there, and he was just wondering if you've settled on one, and which one that was.
Again, we've only really touched on the basic sides of EA, and we didn't really link everything together. If you actually drill down into our drawings, there's a lot more to Archie and Archimate that you can actually detail within your diagrams. We were just going from the point of view of that if we design a structure of the as-is and the to-be, and just make sure that all parties within the university knew what it all meant, and then hopefully if they understood the business side of things, then eventually they might realize what else they didn't understand, which would have been in the application side of things and also the technology side of things. And we just wanted to link all of that together in a way that was useful for all.
That's yeah. Thanks very much for that. I'm worried that we're coming up to sort of 12:30 now, and we've got a second speaker, Stephen Powell, next. So I've made a note of the extra questions that are still in the chat window. But for now, I think we'll move on to Stephen. And if I can ask everyone just to give Ray a virtual round of applause. You know where that is? It's just under the emoticons icon, and the third one down. Sam, yeah, I've got a hand. Oh no, I think that was a mistake as an applause. But yeah, thanks very much for that, Ray. And there's lots of applause going on there. So I'll give you a little bit of a break for now. and we'll hand over to Stephen Powell from the University of Bolton. We'll have time for questions at the end of Stephen's talk, and we'll also have a bit of extra time to ask any questions that Ray didn't have a chance to answer there. So over to you, Stephen.
Yes, thanks for that. As you said, my name's Stephen Powell, and I work for IEC CETUS at the University of Bolton. Just a quick tick from anybody to show me that you can hear me. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. This first slide I've got on the screen is from our university strategic plan, and I would imagine that many of you would recognise something similar from your own institutions. By showing it, really what I'm trying to do is to emphasise that the starting point for EA enterprise architecture should be at a strategic level. So when you take that position, governance is essential in developing direction and purpose for any EA work you might want to undertake. Having said that, in my experience, this isn't easy to establish, and I think I saw some comments in the chat there obliquely referring to this earlier on. But from our perspective at Bolton, EA is about developing institutional capabilities, and their capabilities needed to deliver on both the ongoing operations as well as strategic priorities. And for us, that's the combination you often hear when people talk about EA of people, process, and technology. I think it's probably worth making a point here that there's a difference between EA techniques and other process redesign approaches that some of you may be familiar with, is really that EA is seeking to take this kind of holistic organizational wider view. So from an EA perspective, something like process redesign would be subsumed into EA work, or that's at least how my kind of take on things. So some context. The work I'm going to cover today was partially funded by one of the Jisc Transformation Programme grants. They were £15,000 worth pots of money. And actually the project lead on this, Tracy Harris, isn't here with us today, but she was actually our staff development officer and became interested in enterprise architecture really through conversations with the unit which I work in, IEC CETUS. So we're a small HEI with around 600 staff, and currently 3 faculties, although you can see from that slide, at least from the perspective of the academic support activities, we're currently merging into 1. Okay, and I think that's probably a typical use case for enterprise architecture, or one of the typical use cases, where an organisation is using the EA techniques as they seek to merge different parts of an organisation, or in some cases, totally new organisations, and bring about standardisation of practices, processes, and the technology that supports that. You often find it, as my experience and has been experience here, that even with a small institution, 3 different schools or offices doing, on the face of it, the same process, what they do is actually very different in terms of the detail. And I think actually the explanation of archimate modelling you saw earlier from Staffordshire is a typical technique. You know, it allows to capture different processes, people, and technology, but then used to fulfill the same function. And as they said, the initial work there is often seen as this kind of as-is position where you're trying to work out what you're doing, and then you're working forward to be positioned later on. So the particular work I'm going to describe in a bit more detail was focused on improving faculty business processes, and we used a mixed methods approach really. And it was undertaken as a collaboration between administrators, staff developers, and academics. So it's quite a wide pool of people involved in this work. And although on the slide there I put cost cutting down as one of the titles, I want to make the point that although cost cutting is often a motivation and was for some stakeholders, it wasn't really our motivation for this project. And as a bit of a side, if you read around enterprise architecture, or if you search on the web, you'll come across things like TOGAF, developed by the Open Group. And I saw somebody else commenting about that. And it's really, for those of you that may know something about it, others not, it's really a proven enterprise architecture methodology and framework to improve business efficiency. And there are other things out there like Zachman as well. So although at Bolton we explored TOGAF, we sent staff on training, 4 days worth of training, it happened to be. The truth of the matter is it was well beyond anything that we could cope with as an institution. It really just was too heavyweight. So I suppose my view is that currently techniques such as TOGAF are really for the big players with quite sophisticated approaches to organisational change and development, not really applicable to a small HEI like Bolton. So clearly there are many ideas we can take, but in terms of full implementation, it was just well beyond us. So what we did was we developed our own approach, and broadly speaking, we used I suppose, a soft systems methodology, something like action research. So we identify issues to be addressed, the people required, we prepare plans, we take action, then we evaluate what we've done. And I think it is worth emphasizing that in EA work, we're seeking to bring about change. So, there are other kind of forms of modeling where perhaps we're simply seeking to get a picture of what there is. But in EA, we're certainly trying to bring about change, not just map of the current processes and activities. So having a way of turning plans into a reality is very important. And in big organizations that have fully deployed EA, this would be the role of the project manager. So there may be an enterprise architect who does the initial work and passes over to a project manager who sees through the implementation. Well, that's just not possible in where we are, where everybody has to do pretty much everything. Right, so this slide identifies the techniques and tools that we use in our project and indicates briefly what they were used for. We kind of think of this as a template for action, and the hope and belief is that as a way of working we've developed, we can use it again and again in our organization to address different key institutional priorities aligned with strategic plans. So this is a very pragmatic enterprise architecture approach. It's relatively lightweight, but it does adhere to EA principles, we think, in that it's informed by strategic plans, it comes under the university governance procedures, and takes us from the analysis of a problem through to the implementation of a solution. You can see there are 5 rows there. You can read that for yourself, and you can see that actually the second from the bottom, business process modeling, actually not very well termed, but that's the kind of the thing that Ray was talking about, where we also used Archimate modeling language, and we used Archie, the open source tool, to do this. As you can see there, a key part of that work was just establishing where we are now in terms of the process, the technology, and the people, and where we want to be in the future. And then trying to bridge the gap between those two is really the key thing. Ketso is in there. It's a kind of an approach to idea generation and working creatively, and we found that very effective in bringing pools of people together to really think about problems and identify problems in the first place, and gave us a process to think about creativity. We've also found that, in implementing EA, that workshops have been an essential part of this work. You can't to develop capability. These have been, in some cases, we've tried to get some staff using Archimate, using Archie, but also workshops that address the implementation of a solution. So I think what I'm trying to emphasize in putting this slide up here is that really you have to take a holistic view. It's no good just working out what you want to do. You've got to see a way through to actually achieving that. And that, for me, is the essence of enterprise architecture. And you can see at the bottom there is we supported all of this activity just through a Moodle site, because we had about probably 40 people involved in 3 different school offices. And so kind of keeping the thing together, keeping people talking, sharing the models that we produce in Archimate, using that as a kind of a repository was a kind of important aspect of our work. Right. So yeah, just to emphasize again, the work we're doing here is really trying to keep us in line with the key strategic plan I showed you earlier on. Now, through our Ketso activity, we identified in our schools, we identified these 3 key processes that we wanted to address. And I imagine that many of you can recognize those as in your institutions: assessment boards, applications, and mitigating circumstances. And if you just reflect on that a minute, and you think about any one of those, and think about the different people involved, be they academics, support staff, think about the technology that might be used from anything from, it could be your L drive or equivalent in your institution, it could be email, even on relatively simple processes, as we saw again in the previous presentation, it gets pretty complicated pretty quick. So I'm not actually going to, and this is part of our kind of Archie modeling that we did, and I'm not really going to cover that in detail because I think you've probably got a very clear idea of what that involves. We probably didn't go as far as Staffordshire, we didn't dig in as much detail, But those are the kind of things that we did. And really all I wanted to do was to share with you really the reason for using an approach such as Archie as part of our enterprise architecture. And I think I've got kind of 4 things really that it does for us. It helps the conversations between different stakeholder groups, particularly those in different departmental silos. So when you're trying to get people talking who work in different silos together, it's very useful to have a diagram of what goes on to try and get both identify or get an agreement about what's going on, but also identify where things are done differently. Yeah, okay, it's very difficult to do, as we saw earlier, with a list of kind of steps. It maybe appears the same thing, but when you dig a bit deeper, things are often different. It also helps understanding between those different organizational roles. So those concerned with technology versus maybe those concerned with business processes. I myself am not a programmer, but when we want to kind of work with the IT department here and get things developed, it's important for us to be able to talk with them and explain what the process is that we're trying to support. It allows for identification of issues, such as how changes in process will impact upon technology. So, as we saw earlier on, when you change your process, often somewhere down below, either in the application layer or the technology layer, there will be impacts. And we often find that we get unintended consequences when we change things. But if we can get a reasonable level of things modeled out, there's a chance of avoiding some of that. And I said earlier on, really, in our case, it particularly enabled these conversations between different school faculty when seeking to align their processes to move forward in a merger. So, I really just want to offer some reflections, really, on our kind of experience of enterprise architecture, and also subsumed within that our use of Archimate. I think the biggest single challenge is moving the organisation to a position where it's enterprise architecture ready. In our case, we've been working on this for a few years, and although we've made progress, there's a long way to go for our organisation. So, you know, having the conversation with people in IT, with middle managers, with the senior managers, and trying to get some awareness built is actually it's a long game. I don't think it can happen quickly. But I do think, on a more positive note, we can see real impact where we've tried to deploy the ideas in particular context to particular issues. So this is this kind of introducing EA by stealth, I suppose. And in the examples given above, I've briefly talked about the 3 examples. I think those 5 points there are my reflections on things we've managed to achieve. And I think we are on the right track to having a more systematic approach to organisational improvement. And in this case, it was notable how using Archimate techniques made a significant impact with dealing with stakeholders in bringing out the credibility of the work we were doing. So, working with people, largely school office managers, and getting them to think about problems, but then enabling them to kind of professionalize what they were doing and generate Archimate models and documentation was certainly very valuable in persuading senior management that actually they knew what they were talking about. So that's a kind of for me, that's a very interesting one. You know, even though you're starting at the bottom, if you can produce things that look convincing and are convincing and are demonstrably well developed and thought through, it does enable you to start introducing some of these EA ideas and techniques. That's really all I've got to say on that, so I'll leave it there and see if there are any questions to either of us. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Stephen. Thanks for that. There is one question at the moment. If anybody does have any other questions for Stephen, please post them. The question that's there at the left, Stephen, is how do you know when your organisation is EA ready? Who decides?
Yeah, well, I think for us, that's clearly our enterprise activities have not come from the top. They've definitely been a group of people, myself included, and other colleagues, the director of IST, who have picked up on these ideas and are trying to introduce them and push the organisation in that direction. So I suppose when is it ready to start? It's always ready to start something. But when will we ever be kind of ready for any kind of wider implementation? That's very hard to say. I mean, maybe never in this organisation. I really do think that the level of difficulty, it is at that level. You know, you're trying to change the culture in an organisation, and often these cultures have been established over many years and won't change easily.
Building on that, actually, Claire's question that's just come in. She's asking, am I right in understanding that EA is a tool in your toolkit, or do you see it as something more fundamental?
I think the concept of enterprise architecture is more fundamental, and it's really the other way around, that enterprise architecture wraps around many other tools in the toolkit, and one of the tools in that toolkit would be Archimate, a way of modeling things. Another tool in the toolkit would be your project management approach. Another tool in the toolkit would be your governance. So enterprise architecture is a very big thing, okay? That's how I view it. And there are many, many components you need to try and line up if you want to be successful with enterprise architecture. But the reality is you won't have them all in place, and some of them will prove very difficult to get moving with. And particularly those areas around governance and linking strategy with implementation are very difficult, I would suggest.
Thanks again for that. We're getting some really interesting questions coming through. Sam Biggs, actually, a similar question that he asked to Ray, so perhaps Ray might be able to give an answer to this as well. But he was just wondering how you marketed this. Did you actually market this as an EA project? Or did you, I know you alluded to EA by stealth before, but did you mention EA to other people, or did you kind of just keep that under wraps?
Yeah, I definitely kept it under wraps. I never really mentioned the words enterprise architecture, just from the point of view of possibly confusing people, because they might go onto the internet and start typing in enterprise architecture and find out much more than I was actually going to be using within this project.
Stephen, did you have a take on that?
Well, within the people who are interested, yes, we do. But I think you're right, to actually try and explain it to I suppose largely senior managers would be one example. It'd be a very difficult thing to do, and probably not very helpful, unless you had a manager that had come through a particular route to get to their post. You know, most senior managers in higher education, certainly, I don't know about FE exactly what route that would be. They've come from an academic discipline, so it would be a difficult concept to introduce, I think, if you started using terminology like enterprise architecture, and not at all helpful. They'd search and find TOGAF and then run away, I think.
Yeah, I think we've had similar experiences across a broad range of projects that we've been involved with from a Jisc perspective as well. Very similar things coming out there. Because another question just popped up there. Which group is the main target for using EA tools to influence? Exec board, project stakeholders, IT department, or other? And that's from Carl Racy. Stephen, if I could ask you to.
Yeah, I mean, we tried everyone. I mean, I think what's an interesting point I will make, in the particular tool that's worth thinking about is using Archimate modeling language. Is that getting your head around the different views that you need to produce for different audiences is very important. So clearly, the views that we saw earlier on, if they were placed in front of the exec board, people would just turn white, wouldn't they, and would not be possible to engage with that level of complexity. So I think that one key element here is that thinking about the view of, and it could be anything, but I'm using an Archimate view as an example, thinking about how you present that for a particular stakeholder group for a particular purpose is very important. If you want to show somebody that something's going to get, the finance director, that something's going to get, for example, less expensive or simpler, you want a few boxes, and then on the next slide you want less boxes. But I think you just have to think about what you're trying to persuade someone to buy into, and that's my view of that.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, similar experiences from other Jisc projects that I've certainly liaised with. Will has asked a question for both speakers. Have you liaised with any other higher education institutions with regards to their approaches to enterprise architecture? Ray, did you want to come in on this one first, or?
As you said at the beginning of the webinar, Andy, at Jisc we're running some workshops last year, and I was actually on one of those workshops down in London for the day, and that's the only time that I've liaised with other higher education institutions.
I think that would be similar for us as well. A few Jisc workshops, a few Jisc projects people were, but it'd be very informal. It'd be very much, conversations. I mean, Liverpool John Moores, for example, they've done a lot in this area, and you tend to come across people from there if you go to the various meetings. Not a great deal though.
I should mention we're actually in the process of updating the online resources that we have around enterprise architecture, and as part of some of the early work that we did in this area, there were a number of example models and that kind of thing that came out of it. They're currently hosted elsewhere, so we're going to bring everything together in a sort of an update to that resource. So hopefully that'll be of use to people. We're also thinking of trying to develop an e-learning module around getting started with enterprise architecture, but that's still very early days, and we need to plan that appropriately. But just so people are aware that we're trying to bring some more resources around that. The models that were developed are from various institutions, and I think there might be some from both Bolton and Staffs, but certainly there are a number of institutions involved in that. We have another question from Christine. When you use enterprise architecture as opposed to standard business analysis, Stephen, I know you touched upon that within your presentation. Did you want to reflect on that question?
So what was the question again? Just read that again, can you? Didn't catch it.
When would you use EA as opposed to standard business analysis?
Well, I think, Christian, the answer is if you had a if your organisation bought into EA, it would be something that would be everywhere. Yeah, if you go in if you went to a TOGAF course and you experience that kind of full-on EA, the argument would run that enterprise architecture should run through everything, and that business analysis would be part of that cycle of improvement, and it would come early on in the stage. It would follow the kind of the requirements part of the activity, but you would always be using EA to kind of as a process. I suppose that's what I'm trying to get across. I was trying to get that through earlier on, really. The EA is about a process, so it does require people to see things from the kind of the taking it very much from the institutional priorities. Through to prioritization, through to the kind of work that you might be referring to there, through to project planning and implementation and evaluation. And that's why we kind of took the action research approach as a very lightweight view of enterprise architecture.
Thanks, Stephen. That's brilliant. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to go back to the earlier questions that were asked to Ray. So apologies for jumping around a little bit, but there was a question asked from Claire Foyle. Was thanking you for the response to the original question, but she was also asking, do you think EA also helps those conversations between the business and IT? So I guess it's just around communications within the institution and between different stakeholder groups. Ray, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. That final gap analysis that I showed you at the end of my my presentation, I actually took that to our IT department. Now, I didn't take it to the heads of our IT department, only because I actually used to work within the IT department. So I took it to the people who I knew were responsible for the backups of servers and the likes of things like that, just to basically show them how important this project was to the university and all of the different groups and the faculties around the university who are actually going to be using the system, and to put some kind of importance on the end of, you know, just when I was asking for nightly backups of the servers, of the build server and the production server and the staging server, because it was kind of quite a bit of work, I was actually asking the IT department to actually do on my behalf.
I think building on that, Ray, Veronica's next question as well, did your IT department fully understand why you used EA? I guess it helped communicate what your problems were, as you've just mentioned, but
yeah, basically it kind of just helped show. I mean, your IT department generally only deals with the technology layer, and also the application layer, but definitely they would never really deal with the business layer of things. And to show them, you know, the business layer of the process of this system and where that actually mapped in and to the applications you were running on which servers, then it was useful for them as well to see why in our case we had so many servers for the actual system, and you know, again to make sure that everything was all backed up and there weren't any problems with the infrastructure itself.
Great stuff. There was another question from Santos. Was EA in the CIO department or outside the CIO department? I guess building on that question, maybe perhaps both Ray and Stephen might want to come in on this. But at what level do you have an enterprise architecture? Do either of you have a full view of the institution, or both projects simply used it for specific context within the institution?
Yeah, I definitely.
Building on Santos's question, who actually owns it?
Well, it's definitely in my instance, it was only used within this project itself. So it was all down to me and my department who decided on the actual EA structure itself. I'm not sure that would really answer your question though. So,
Stephen, did you have any comments on that? Or?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we don't have a CIO department, and I don't think many institutions are just not that well developed in the way they run and organize themselves. So definitely, so there isn't that. I mean, that's the problem with governance, isn't it? There isn't, or one of the difficulties with governance, there isn't necessarily that strong connection between the strategy of an organization and how it's trying to move its way forward. And I think that would be typical for many universities and FE colleges. So I think what Santos highlights there is a problem.
I can't see any of the questions at the moment, and we are approaching 1 o'clock, so I think I'm going to draw this to a close. Can I just ask everybody to give, I know I forgot to ask people to give Stephen a round of applause, but if we can give both speakers and everybody involved today a round of applause. I'd just like to thank everybody for attending today's session. I hope you've enjoyed it. We will be making the recording available afterwards. Ray, Stephen, thanks very much for your time on this. The presentations were excellent, very interesting. And so that I'll draw the session to a close. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, actually, before everybody goes, Will just reminded me actually whether or not it's worth getting an indication whether the webinar was useful, and if people are interested in future webinars, we can certainly try and organise those. I know I'm getting a green tick there from Claire. Christine's writing something. Carl's got a green tick. As mentioned as well, I'm hoping to try and do something around the benefits of EA, so certainly I'll try and organise some webinars around that. Couple of comments there saying, yeah, very useful. Great stuff. We'll certainly publicise events through the blog that I mentioned earlier on, and also there is a Jisc mail list. I believe it's called Enterprise Architectures, which is sometimes a bit odd. It's got the plural on the end, so if you are searching to join that, then you need to make sure you type the right thing in. But when we make this recording available through the blog, we'll make all of that information clear within the post. To that end, thanks very much, everybody, and hope to speak to you all soon.